Welcome to Community Crypto on CoinDesk TV. I'm your host, Isaiah Jackson, and this week we are discussing crypto and blockchain innovation in Puerto Rico. I'm joined now by Michael Turpin, the founder of Transform Group, the #1 crypto strategy firm in Puerto Rico, and David Johnson, a serial tech entrepreneur who is the chief operating officer at DLTX. I want to remind everyone that this is not financial advice and all views are our own. Welcome to the show, fellas.
Hey, good to be here.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Great to have you both. And I'll start with you, Michael. Give us a little bit about your background in the crypto industry.
Sure. Well, I got involved in early 2013 and started doing marketing for the crypto industry. Transform Group is based in Puerto Rico. I moved here in early 2016. I was the first person from the crypto world to move here. We're based in Puerto Rico. We are actually a global enterprise, and we work with more than half of the tokens and foundations in the industry from Ethereum on down. And a lot of this because of my meeting David Johnston the very first day that I went to the first Bitcoin Foundation conference. And I was looking around and I saw that Ripple was funded by Union Square Ventures and they announced their A round, and CoinDesk was funded by Andreessen Horowitz. And I saw, wow, those are big VCs. Where are the angel groups? And David said, well, they're kind of around, but there's no real group. And I suggested we start one. We called it Beta Angels. And by the end of the week, we had an initial meeting of 30 people. And about a week later, we had 60 top investors, everybody from like Bitcoin Jesus, Roger Ver, to Charles Cascarillo, now running Paxos, $1 billion plus exchange, Vinny Lingham, all sorts of superstars. And that was the genesis then for Coin Agenda, which was making a conference to educate traditional investors about investing in crypto opportunities, which back then was just Bitcoin and Bitcoin wallets and Bitcoin exchanges, and now includes the world of DeFi and NFTs and NFT gaming and all that. And this is the 8th year we're doing Coin Agenda, and the 5th year we're doing Coin Agenda in Puerto Rico. We also do Asia and Europe and North America, our global conference in Las Vegas. And this is the second time that we're doing a Puerto Rico blockchain week. The first time we sold out every hotel room in the island. And this time it looks like we're selling out every event. Puerto Rico Blockchain Trade Association was on Monday, sold out. Metaverso had over, I think, 800 people yesterday for a Metaverse conference, sold out. We sold out here. And the final event is on Friday, along with many, many side events. We've got over 3,000 people on the island. Couldn't be more delighted.
Love it. Yes, David, jump in there. Give us your background as well.
Sure. Like Michael said, we met in 2013 at the Bitcoin Foundation conference. I was already building tech companies for the last 10 years, and I saw the energy in Bitcoin. And yeah, it was just an amazing honor and privilege to fund so many of the early projects and protocols. So did the information report on, if you remember, Mastercoin was the first ever token sale. And I wrote the report for Ethereum and a lot of the early protocols. And so, ended up going full-time in the space 8 years ago. And now with DLTX, we effectively build large-scale blockchain infrastructure. That's like Bitcoin mining, Filecoin mining. We have these big divisions, and it's all about how do we bring Web3 to the mainstream, right? How do we get all these peer-to-peer systems to replace the old Web2 tech companies, right? So that's our whole thing. We're a Norwegian public company, so we're like one of the first people to do a reverse merger into a public company and make it an all crypto, all blockchain enterprise. So yeah, Puerto Rico is awesome. I moved here in March. Man, I should have moved years ago, but I had to see it, believe it. And so after I visited, I just basically never went home. And so it's been awesome. Michael's been the great emissary educating people in the space about Puerto Rico. And I effectively think we're building Singapore in America is the opportunity, right? Because the federal regulations have totally missed the boat. Most of the protocols have left the US, but you can be in Puerto Rico and still be a US person, right? And that's an incredible superpower that the island has that most people don't understand. But, you saw all the big companies starting to make the move here, the builders, the entrepreneurs in the last few years. That was my signal. It's like, I got to get down there. I got to be part of this. I can't miss out on what they're building.
Well, first, let me say, Mastercoin, hearing that is a blast from the past. So as somebody, myself, as somebody who was around in 2013, just hearing that just made my day because I remember that. And it's great that you stated, when you went to Puerto Rico, you ended up staying. You didn't want to leave. So I would love to hear from you and Michael. If you could give a quick elevator pitch, if somebody was saying, hey, I'm thinking about moving to Puerto Rico, just give us a quick pitch. How would you do it? And I'll start with you, Michael. What's a quick pitch to give to someone to move to Puerto Rico?
It's rapidly becoming the most important tech center for blockchain leadership. And the reasons are that, again, as David has stated, it's becoming the Singapore of America, because it's the only place in the world where you can come down, not give up your U.S. passport. And of course, the U.S. taxes you worldwide. If you go to Singapore, you're still going to pay the same taxes as if you lived in Cleveland, other than you'd also pay state taxes. Here, there's a program called Act 60 that allows you to come down here as an investor, pay zero on your capital gains, zero to the IRS, zero to Puerto Rico. So that really helps in compounding your interest as an investor. And then as an entrepreneur,
right,
there's the company component where Microsoft is the biggest beneficiary of it. They have all of Microsoft offices for North and South America is all made of a division of Microsoft in Puerto Rico. They make it here, they ship it elsewhere, zero to the IRS, 4% to Puerto Rico. So big or small, there's some giant companies down here, even more moving down here. And of course, you put the two together, you move here personally as a founder, and you start a company that's paying 4% to Puerto Rico and zero to the IRS. And then you're able to go and give profits and distributions and sell your founder shares when eventually you have an exit and pay zero. That's having the effect. I'm looking at what happened to Seattle and what happened to Las Vegas with Tony Hsieh, what happened to Seattle with first Microsoft and then Amazon. It created just legions of millionaires who then went and started new companies. And we're seeing that here now. We already have several top 100 protocols down here. EOS, of course, with Brock Pierce. You've got Horizon with Rob Vigliano moving his whole team down here. You've got what David is doing with Public Company. There's another dozen or so that I'm forgetting that David can mention. And it's really sort of the first wave. I moved here in 2016. I was the first person. By the end of 2017, there were maybe 20 of us. By the end of 2018, there were about 200. And now there's at least 500 or 600 just crypto industry overall, and including traditional investors and entrepreneurs. I think it's around 6,000. And the goal over the entire life of the program was supposed to be 10,000. So we're on track. And the other thing is the amount of revenue that's bringing to the island. David, maybe you're more up to stats on this, but I think James Haft said something along the lines of it's almost 10% of the economy now. Cash flow is coming in from Act 60 companies.
Wow.
Yeah, the numbers just from last year, it's probably getting close to 10% now. We're 5% last year. It's basically in this doubling effect where, when somebody moves down, right, then they call their partner and say, hey, you got to move down here. And that's what I did, right? I came in March and I called James. It was like, we need to be in Puerto Rico. He's like, all right, cool. I'll be there next week. And then we called our other partner, Tim. He's like, okay, I'll come next week. And I called my parents like, hey, you're ready to retire, right? And so they came the week after that. And so it's like this domino effect. Once somebody gets what's going on here, then they start bringing in all their community. So like, I thought I'd have to do all this travel or I'd need to go other places to see investors. And I was like, I just realized like, no, they're already all here. Like, I don't need to go anywhere for like what we're doing. The founders, the developers, the protocol leaders, like just in my building, I won't like dox the location, but just in this building is like $1 billion hedge fund on the 5th floor. There's a big co-working space full of blockchain stuff on the 6th floor. We took over the 8th floor and the guys from Immutable Holdings are on the 12th floor. Like literally filling up this office building with all the blockchain tech. And that's the pitch. It's like, this industry is going to happen and it's going to happen at a huge scale. And in 2014, New York kicked at everybody with the BIT license. right? Who's got 30 million to get a bit license? Or even if you do, you got to wait 3 years, right? And so everybody left New York, right? People tried to go to Shanghai. Like that was a big center. People forget like most of the major exchanges were in Shanghai in 2017. And then the Chinese kicked everybody out, right? And the energy flowed to Hong Kong. Guess what happened? Hong Kong's not friendly anymore. And where's FTX moving? They're moving to the Caribbean. They're moving to Bahamas, right? And so crypto is searching for a tech center. And as a US person, this is about the best deal you can possibly get. The big thing that I would say is I thought people were like moving here to hang out on the beach and retire. And that was my perception of like Caribbean islands. And then I came and I realized there were 3 million people on this island. I realized San Juan was 2.5 million, and that's the same size as Austin, Texas. Like that's big enough to really build a tech center, right? You can't do that on an island with 50,000 people. It's just too small. But Puerto Rico is not that, right? It is 3 million people. It's big enough to have that network effect. And once I was sold on that, I was like, okay, now I can see getting an office, buying a home, building a team here, hiring a bunch of local people. Because usually that's the challenge. Like an island's too small. It's like you can't get people to stay. Puerto Rico is the opposite. There are 6 million Puerto Ricans on the mainland that would like to live here, but they had to leave for opportunity, right? That's their diaspora. And they'd be happy to come back. All of a sudden, there's this reverse brain drain where the smartest entrepreneurs and people realize, oh, I could get a better deal there than in New York. Like my last friend who's ethnically Puerto Rican just left New York for Puerto Rico, right? His parents had to move there for opportunity. He's not got an opportunity there. He's got a better deal in Puerto Rico. So that's really cool to see.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on what you said, where it's sort of a doubling effect. I have a friend, Mark Moss, I just talked to this past weekend. He's building a house in Puerto Rico. He spent most of our time together with other people convincing everybody else to move to Puerto Rico. And he got me sold. I mean, he doesn't have to sell it to me after what he was selling. But you're right. As soon as it starts building, it is interesting that people are leaving America, going to Puerto Rico, where it was reversed before. So great to see. And I wanted to touch on the fact that both of you have basically said it without saying it. But do regulators usually set the stage for innovation? Because we've seen regulation crush innovation in other countries. But do you think the low taxes, Puerto Rico is maybe a tax haven, as well as the regulators, do you think that is what's really pulling people to come? And will that continue to happen as other governments become more strict?
So you have to remember, we are part of the United States, but we're also a territory, which puts us in a unique place that really is most similar to Singapore and to where Hong Kong was before China said, no, we're taking over. And when you have that kind of, halfway in, halfway out situation, it gives you a lot of room for creativity. It's really like a special economic zone. I mean, we had Hester Peirce, the crypto bomb commissioner of the SEC, come down here in person. I've seen her speak a number of times via video. Keiko got her to come down here in person, talk to the community, because we are under the guidance of the SEC. But instead of having just a state SEC the way that they do with Wyoming, having their Wyoming version of the SEC say, we're going to go and innovate and allow tokens to do things under the Open Blockchain Act. Puerto Rico, of course, has been considering things like that. And one thing that we did that's completely unique to any other state is the IFE laws. We had a panel here earlier at Coin Agenda Caribbean where we had 2 banks that are up and running, and they can bank anyone with crypto in the mainland, just not in Puerto Rico. So we're effectively territorial and chartered, but at the moment there's sort of an exemption because they don't want to immediately kind of compete with all these great services against the local banks. But anybody in the mainland can go and bank here. And I'm sure there'll be ways eventually that people who are native here but who have ownership positions in Puerto Rican companies can still benefit. But that's just like a very small part. I think that, OSIP here is sort of like another regulatory body. They've been behind IFEs. They've been very open and friendly. And I think they see the opportunity of what the numbers speak in terms of the amount of new business, new cash coming into the island. I mean, there have been three programs that have happened over the last 60 years, and they've all been great for the island. The first was bringing aerospace down in the 60s. The second was bringing pharmaceutical down in the 80s. It turned this island into the seventh largest manufacturing center of pharmaceuticals in the world, if it was a standalone country, for an island of 3 million people. There was a very brief period of time where there were no decrees. And that's when they took out the $90 billion in debt. And it turned out to be a mistake versus just having another decree program where it doesn't cost the people of Puerto Rico anything. It just simply brings in people who would otherwise not be here to pay a different type of tax. We all pay an awful lot of tax. We pay a lot of tax on our homes, on the highest sales tax in the country, and we then redeploy the capital gains into hiring more people, starting more businesses. And we're all very active entrepreneurs in this space. We're not just sitting here laying on the beach and ordering margaritas, which would still be taxed.
So let's jump into that, as you said, because local citizens are starting to get the benefit of those jobs and of those businesses. David, maybe you can speak to this. What has been the response from local citizens about the use case of blockchain, and how many jobs have been created as a result of this big move to Puerto Rico?
I found local people to be super welcoming, right? Especially, younger people. Like, they get the industry, they all speak English, they're super savvy. And one of the things that we helped sponsor and start recently was Crypto Curious, basically a meetup for locals that's in Spanish, talking about 101 crypto stuff, how to create a wallet, how to get your crypto accounts open and stuff like that. And, it's just been a huge wave of people come in and be hungry for that. Right. And now we've basically handed it over to the locals. So it's all local Puerto Ricans teaching other local Puerto Ricans every Monday in Spanish how to get involved in this industry. And so, I think, that's like the first order effect. And then there's all the second order effects of like how people are benefiting. I honestly believe this can be the most prosperous place in the United States, bar none, in the next 10 years, right? And kind of flip the script, right? Now I talk with guys that are still in New York. I'm like, I'm sorry to hear you're still stuck there. I hope you get out. I hope you get to Puerto Rico. And they're like, and they don't even, it's not even a joke anymore. They're like, yeah, I know everybody's going there. I'm trying to get there. Like, it becomes the aspirational place where the smartest people are like, yeah, I see the trend. That's where all the smart people are going. That's where I want to be. It reminds me a lot of when I moved to Austin in 2012, right? It was still kind of gritty. People were talking about it, but the big companies really hadn't made the move yet, right? But the opportunity and the fundamentals were right. And you saw the energy coming in, and it was really cool. I mean, the city almost doubled in size while I was there, right? Like the last 9 years. It really feels like we're in that same place for San Juan that Austin used to be, but they have a superpower Austin never had, right? Which is be able to set more of their own policies, not be U.S. federal taxpayers, but rather Puerto Rican taxpayers, right? And I would give credit to Puerto Rico for having the foresight to be friendly to this industry, right? To come out and speak at the conferences and said, we welcome you guys here. Right, we want you here, right? And they've been very supportive. So, people are always worried about if the law is going to change. I think they get it. I think that this is a huge engine of growth for the island. And if it keeps growing at this rate, it's going to be like most of the economy of the island in the next 10 years is going to be from these programs.
Oh, yeah. And that sounds like the real flippening. People talk about Ethereum and Bitcoin or other coins flippening, but that looks like the real flippening is people from New York running to Puerto Rico or from other places as well. So, and that's very interesting because in this industry, we know it's a global industry, but you still have to live in this world. So as places like Puerto Rico, Wyoming, other countries as well, when they're more favorable, it seems as though taking that leap has basically made them, more prosperous. So why wouldn't other places do it? And then we'll see the game theory play out. So it's just amazing to see. And I want to bring up something here. In a recent Bloomberg article, they stated that lawmakers are looking into ways Puerto Rico can use the blockchain to fight corruption. So I want to start with you, Michael. What are some of the technological aspects that make this possible?
Well, it's all in the blockchain, right? And I would actually defer this question to David because I'm really more concentrating on sort of bringing investors here, connecting policy with entrepreneurs, really more to be able to bring business in as opposed to have the ability of having largely it's permissioned blockchains that are cutting out corruption by having things on an immutable ledger. And that's typically going to be a permission blockchain. And there's great use for permission blockchains. I'm the chairman of a group called SDG Exchange, which DLTX is also an investor in, which is the world's first 24/7 sort of NASDAQ, if you will, for carbon credits. And that's a permission blockchain so that there's no issue of pumping and dumping. There's no issue of it being a convertible virtual currency. It can be used to fund terrorism, et cetera. You basically take the same Ethereum virtual machine and you simply write a smart contract that stops it to say it can only do this. You can only buy it and then retire it to fulfill your Paris obligations. With government, it's also best to be permission because you can say, it's completely transparent. It's on a blockchain that is not written by the government. It's written by Ethereum or whatever blockchain you want to put it on, open source. But then you'll say it can stop here. It's not something that's going to be a for-profit speculative instrument. It's going to be the element of the blockchain that is simply the immutable ledger, so that you can say, okay, instead of like. I remember there's a couple of years ago, I think under the end of the Rosengau administration, it was like, oh, we just found $5 billion. We're not quite sure where that went to. Or in the United States, when you have like, what was it, $80 billion that fell off the tanks and nobody's ever audited the Fed. So I'm going to turn it over to David about how, since DLT is a big part of his company's name, how that this can help governments.
Sure. So specifically on this subject, Keiko gets the credit, right? Keiko is doing an amazing job with the Puerto Rican Blockchain Association, and it's through education, right? And they've been holding, educational seminars open to, the legislature and say, let us teach you about blockchain. And, to their credit, right, the House of Puerto Rico has been very receptive. And it's really cool to see them passing this thing that says, hey, we want to look at how to use the technology. We're going to, set up a group to look at that and figure that out. That's going to just the first steps, but it makes perfect sense. Like, we do a lot of Filecoin infrastructure, and that's public distributed, infrastructure for data storage. That kind of stuff alone is like, how do you replace AWS and pay 90% less and do it in a way that's open source? We're starting to get to that point where there's all these practical tools that people can use. So huge credit to her and to the legislators that are sort of really starting to get it.
Yes, great to hear. And again, this is what it's all about, right? If we're trying to impact the world, we need to keep the public sector public and the private sector private. And I think we're starting to see that actually happen, which is, again, great innovation wise. And the Puerto Rican Blockchain Conference is this week. So I want to ask you fellas, what are some of the topics you are most excited about discussing or hearing someone discuss this week? And I'll start with you, Michael.
Sure. So Puerto Rico Blockchain Week is not just one conference. It's 4 conferences and about 25 side events. So when I started the first crypto conference in the Caribbean in early 2017, it was sort of the first in the entire Caribbean region. And I had people saying, oh, thank you. I didn't know anybody else in the area or in Puerto Rico cared about blockchain, cared about crypto. And we only had 85 people show up. But, oh, my God, the people who showed up, and they came from all over the world. Alphabet, which is now a $500 million fund that I'm an investor in, they launched here. They flew in from Abu Dhabi. FBG, which is another $500 million fund, flew in from Beijing. They're one of the most influential funds in the world. Bancor came in from Israel. They launched here. And so it was just amazing from the beginning how many people were interested in the opportunity of Puerto Rico. And I've had people since say that was the most amazing conference they ever went to. The next year was when we had the first Puerto Rico Blockchain Week, where I encouraged other events. Brock Pierce had one called D10E, and there was one that's no longer around called Puerto Crypto. And between the three of us, we had a whole week long, as well as side events, and sold out every single hotel room on the island. People were foaming to get in, and they had to sleep on people's floors because the Airbnbs were even sold out. And of course, this was right after Hurricane Maria, so there was a lot of curiosity about, how things were coming. Were they going to survive? We got 60 TV crews and media crews, and it was an amazing amount of media coverage we had down here. We had, I think, 3 crews from CNBC. We had Max Kaiser do his entire show from down here, and and we've recovered. I mean, people are still asking me, can you still get electricity in Puerto Rico? I said, like, yes. It was tough. It was a Category 5, but we have the technology here. And, if you haven't been to Puerto Rico in a while, come on down. It's really, it's kind of the entertainment qualities of Miami with whatever lifestyle you want. I mean, it's an amazing diversity. Old San Juan is incredibly historic, and you can... I live in the Miramar district, which is where we're holding the conference here, which is very family oriented, but it's got Restaurant Row. You can walk everywhere. And my wife and I are building a country house in Guaynabo, where David lives. And there you can buy 5 acres and have grow whatever you want. You can have bananas, you can have chickens, and still be 15 minutes from the heart of the city. So it's an amazing diversity, sort of like when I lived in Los Angeles, where you can, ski in the morning and then bake on the sun on the beach in the evening or in the afternoon. So that's kind of what's been happening here just as a city. And then this one is we moved it now from spring Puerto Rico Blockchain Week to the week after Art Basel. And I think it's going to be a permanent move because Art Basel itself has changed. Many people, with 70,000 people coming to Miami last week, thought it was an NFT conference. I mean, there was both at the traditional, we had all sorts of news crews all over the place saying what's happening with the NFTs. I mean, we had a dozen companies I'm either advising or help marketing, do things there. Michael Cohen, the political figure, did an NFT drop through Art Grails, which is off of the Art Life Gallery, and got a lot of attention. Was on Nightline and things like that. It's just like so much stuff going on there.
And I was there. That's what the great thing. I was there.
Next year's just going to be the bigger.
Yeah, I was at Art Basel. It did really feel like an NFT conference. And we're running out of time here. I want to get to you, David. One last thing. You have the last question. What is the future of blockchain technology in Puerto Rico over the next 20 years? What can you see in a short sentence? What can you see Puerto Rico going towards?
I can see Puerto Rico being the place where protocols are built, where the whole industry sort of comes to do business, right? To be the capital center for everything related to the U.S. The U.S. It's gone down this route. It was sort of driven out. Everybody can either expatriate or you can move to Puerto Rico. Let me say, it's a lot easier to move to Puerto Rico, right? You can keep your passport. There's no visas needed. You just show up, get a driver's license, buy a house, and open an office, right? And you can be up and running. And so, I like to say Miami is a good gateway drug for Puerto Rico. Like, if you're willing to move to Miami, go just a little further and you can get like the whole package, right? And to Michael's point, it's like, right after Art Basel, everybody's already in Miami. It's 2 hours on the flight to Puerto Rico. So it's a no-brainer for people to come here. And, if they're thinking about making a move for next year, December's the perfect time to come anyway. One, it's probably cold wherever you are. Right.
It's cold,
and 2, okay, well, I'm going to grab a place before December 31st, right? I'm going to start, setting up my residency, right? So there's kind of like these waves in both December and June when people come down. So I think more and more, it's going to be the tech center in the U.S. for everything crypto. We're already a long ways towards that, but I think people are just going to realize and wake up one day. It's like, yeah, of course, everything's in Puerto Rico. It's the Singapore of the U.S., right? So. Yeah, exactly. Of course. That always has been that. Ever since Michael Turpin.
Exactly. Ever since Michael Turpin. Thank you. And I will say I'm booking my flight to Puerto Rico now to make sure that I can get in on innovation. You guys have definitely convinced me. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, David, for coming on to the show today.
All right.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. And that's it for this episode of Community Crypto. I'm your host, Isaiah Jackson, and every week we're building a global community with local crypto groups. So be sure to tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern on CoinDesk TV. See you then.